All right, welcome back. Today, we're essentially building a blueprint for the modern business. One that's not just about profit, but is sustainable, resilient, and actually built for the future. We're going to dive deep into ESG, carbon management, and critical risk. Let's get right into it.
It feels like everywhere you turn, there's another three-letter acronym telling companies how they should operate. But this isn't just corporate jargon. Not anymore. It's a fundamental shift in what it even means to be a successful business in the 21st century. So, what's really going on here?
Well, it all boils down to one simple fact. The rules of the game have completely changed. There's a new mandate, a new set of expectations for every single company out there.
I mean, for decades, the goal was super simple: make as much money as possible for shareholders. But that's just not enough anymore. To get funding, to comply with new laws, or to even be a part of a major supply chain, you have to prove your business is responsible. This isn't just a nice to have. We're talking about survival and basic market access.
Okay, so how do you actually prove you're playing by these new rules? Well, you have to learn to speak the new language of sustainability, and that language is all about reporting.
And what's really telling is that we are way past the point of just making vague promises. The new gold standard is creating systems and reports that are audit-ready and practical. What does that mean? It means hard data, processes that can be verified, and stuff that actually works in the real world.
So, if there's just one thing you need to get your head around to understand where all of this is going, what would it be? Let's break down the single most important idea.
It's this concept right here, double materiality. The easiest way to think about it is like a two-way street. On one side of the street, you've got impact materiality. That's your company's effect on the world, both good and bad. On the other side, you've got financial risk. That's how what's happening in the world could financially wall up your company. Let's take an electric car maker, for instance. Their impact on the world is great, right? They reduce emissions. But a huge financial risk to them is a global shortage of lithium for their batteries. Modern reporting demands you absolutely have to look at both sides of that street. Okay, this table right here, this is your decoder ring for the whole alphabet soup of ESG standards. Each one has a slightly different job. So you've got GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. That's all about your company's impact on the world for everyone to see. Then there's IFRS. That's focused on how sustainability hits your bottom line. It's what investors and banks really, really care about. And finally, you have ESRS, the new European standards, which basically says you got to do both. It's built on that double materiality principle we just talked about.
All right, so that's the theory. But how does a company actually build the internal engine to make all this stuff happen effectively?
First off, you got to understand that corporate social responsibility has totally changed. The old way? That was basically about writing checks, philanthropy, maybe a nice press release. Modern CSR is a core strategic function. It's about deep operational things like doing human rights due diligence across your entire supply chain. It's a whole different ballgame.
And look, building this engine isn't some chaotic mystery. It follows a really clear, manageable process. As you can see, it all starts at the very top. The board and the execs have to be in charge. Then, you weave it into the systems you already use, like your ISO frameworks. From there, you build a real 3 to 5 year roadmap with clear goals. And the big one, you have to actually budget for it and measure its return on investment, just like any other part of the business. Okay, so we've got the internal systems down. Now let's talk about two of the biggest pressures coming from the outside that every business is dealing with: carbon emissions and, the physical safety of your people and operations.
When it comes to carbon, I want you to forget the abstract science for a second. In business today, managing carbon is money-driven and export critical. What that means is your carbon footprint is now a real number that affects your finances, and it can literally determine whether you can even sell your products in other countries.
So, how in the world do you actually count this stuff accurately? This slide makes it simple. Think of the GHT protocol as your cookbook. It tells you what ingredients, what emissions you need to count. Then, ISO 14064 is like the detailed kitchen manual. It shows you how to set up a reliable system to measure everything perfectly, every single time, so it's verifiable.
And here's exactly why getting that count right is a massive deal. It's called CBAM. Sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. It's a carbon tax that the European Union slaps on certain imported goods. If your product was made with more carbon emissions than a similar product made in Europe, you have to pay the difference. All of a sudden, carbon isn't some fuzzy environmental thing. No, it's a cold, hard trade tariff.
So yeah, that carbon tax is a huge financial risk. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. The other, arguably more immediate risk, is about protecting your people and your assets from actual physical harm. And that's the world of health, safety, and environment, or HSE. And trust me, the stakes here are incredibly high. A good HSE program is laser-focused on the high-risk stuff, the things that can cause the most harm. And it's also designed to be prosecution-resistant because when things go badly wrong, the legal and financial consequences can be absolutely devastating.
And we're not talking about abstract ideas here. We are talking about real, tangible, life or death risks. Things like working up high, going into confined spaces, or dealing with high-voltage electricity. A strong safety system is designed to put controls in place for every single one of these. Look, these aren't just boxes to check on a form. Each one represents a moment where a life could be saved. It's about making sure everyone gets to go home safe at the end of the day.
Okay, so let's recap. We've hit on reporting, governance, carbon, safety, the whole shebang. Now for the big finale. How does doing all this work actually unlock real, measurable value for your company?
At the end of the day, it all boils down to this. Your sustainability program has to be investor-grade and deal-driven. It has to be good enough to withstand the intense scrutiny of people who are deciding whether or not to give you millions of dollars.
And you have got to understand the difference here between ESG reporting and ESG due diligence. Think of it this way. Reporting is you publishing your resume for the world to see. Due diligence is the potential employer calling all your references to see if you're actually telling the truth. It's a deep investigation before they sign a check.
So what are these investors actually digging for when they pop the hood? They're checking if you're even eligible for things like green bonds. They're hunting for any deal-breaker risks that could blow up later. They're directly linking your ESG performance to how much your company is worth. And they want to see rock-solid governments that can manage risk long after the deal is done. And all of this brings us right back to the one final critical question. Mastering ESG, carbon, and risk, this isn't about reputation or just compliance anymore. It's about the fundamental resilience of your business. In a world that is being completely reshaped by these forces, you have to ask yourself, is your business really, truly built to last?